Morning class 12. Today we'll be discussing the theory of multiple intelligence given by Howard Gardner. Now Howard Gardner did a research on people who showed excellence in different areas like say sports, linguistics, mathematics, music, and he went and conducted a research on these people and tried to understand their abilities and their perspective to problem solving. And what he found out is that there are 8 different types of intelligences. And these 8 different types of intelligences, they are independent of each other. So if one person is good at say bodily kinesthetic intelligence, it does not mean that he will be good at musical and visuospatial intelligence. So these 8 intelligences, they are independent of each other. So let's talk about the first intelligence, which is the linguistic intelligence. This basically involves the skill in the production and use of language. People with a high linguistic intelligence are told to be word smart because they are very sensitive to words, what they mean and the effect that it can have on the readers. So usually poets and writers are seen to be high on linguistic intelligence. Next is the logical and mathematical intelligence. Usually scientists and Nobel Prize winners are seen to be high on logical and mathematical intelligence because they can think scientifically, logically and critically to solve problems. Spatial intelligence is basically the good understanding of spaces. So these people can mentally manipulate figures, shapes, and this is what is seen to be high in pilots, sailors, sculptors, painters, architects, interior decorators and even surgeons. Now surgeons will be high on spatial intelligence because they need to know where exactly is this organ located in the body, and say if they are making an incision, to know how much of a depth or how deep does the incision need to be. They need to have good spatial intelligence. Next is bodily kinesthetic intelligence. It basically means that they understand their body and their movement really well. So kinesthetics is anything to do with movement. So they understand their body and their body movements really well. And they can use their body creatively. Now athletes, dancers, actors, sports people are seen to be very high on bodily kinesthetic intelligence. Even surgeons need to have good bodily kinesthetic intelligence because of their fine motor movements. So they need to know how to use their very, very delicate and very, very sharp and thin instruments, and they also need to know how much pressure do they need to put every time they make an incision. So this is what makes even surgeons high on bodily kinesthetic intelligence. Next is interpersonal intelligence. It basically means the intelligence to understand others. So we understand other people's motives, feelings and behaviors. Usually counselors, psychologists, politicians, social workers and religious leaders are seen to be high on interpersonal intelligence. Next is the intrapersonal intelligence. It basically means those people who understand themselves very well. So they understand their motives, their feelings, their desires, their strengths, their weaknesses, even things like their identity and their purpose in the world and their purpose of their life, the meaning of their existence. So these people understand themselves really well, and usually philosophers and spiritual leaders are the ones who are seen high on intrapersonal intelligence. Next is naturalistic intelligence. It basically means that they're very sensitive and they understand the nature very well. So they understand plants, animals, climate really, really well. And hunters, farmers, tourists, botanists, zoologists and bird watchers are seen to be high on naturalistic intelligence. Next comes the musical intelligence. So these are all your singers, instrumentalists and music composers because they are very sensitive to musical rhythm and patterns, and they can also produce, create and manipulate musical patterns. Now, the good thing about this theory is that it didn't just assess people who were book smart. So even those in sports and drawing and in say understanding nature were also told to be smart. But this was also the criticism to this theory because it said that it just dumps people down. It just says people who are not smart that they are smart. And a lot of times a question that students ask is whether the theory of multiple intelligence comes under the information processing approach or the psychometric approach. We would say it comes under the cognitive and contextual approach, because basically it demonstrates intelligence within a particular context. Now, which context? It's our musical, bodily kinesthetics, naturalistic, linguistic, mathematical, all these contexts. So it's intelligence within a particular context. Therefore, we'll say that this comes under the cognitive contextual approach. Next, we will come to the information processing approach of intelligence. Now, this says that intelligence is basically a process. So, we have our first theory, which is called the triarchic theory of intelligence by Robert Sternberg. So, what he said is that there are basically three types of intelligence. First is the componential intelligence. This is also called analytical intelligence. So, what we do here first is that we basically acquire knowledge. So we basically understand and learn the way of doing things. Then we have a higher order component, which basically involves planning concerning what to do and how to do. So the first step is all about getting your knowledge, getting your concepts, getting all the information that you require. Then the higher order component is basically processing all this information about what to do with it and how to do. And the third is the performing component, where you actually go ahead and start performing or solving the problem. So this comes under componential intelligence. Next is experiential intelligence. This talks about using your past experience to solve new problems, or say using your past experiences to solve your current problems. Next is the contextual intelligence. So these people are said to be street smart, and they also seem to have a business sense, because they solve problems using the resources in the environment. So that's why it's called contextual intelligence, because they use the context to solve problems. For experiential intelligence, they use their experience to solve problems. And then in componential intelligence, they basically analyze the information to solve problems. So the good thing about this theory is that it was very, very reliable, and it measures the real world success. But then the criticism was that it just measures the three sides of the same coin. Next is the PASS model of intelligence, and this was given by Negleri, Das and Kirby. And what they said is that intelligence is the process of three neurological systems. So neurological means basically related to the brain. So this theory says that intelligence is the functioning of three systems in the brain. So every time you have a problem, the first step that happens, or say the first step includes arousal and attention. So your body will get aroused, and it's going to pay attention to the problem to gather all the information related to the problem and process this information as much as possible. So the first step in the intelligence is the arousal and attention, where we focus our attention on the problem and then we try to process the problem. Next is simultaneous and successive processing. So here we will process the problem, either all of the information together, or we will understand the information step by step. Like say if I ask you to learn the process to make tea, so you will know that okay, first you do this, then you do this. Okay, first you take a container, put it on the flame, heat some water, then you will put some tea leaves. So see, the process of making tea, it includes steps. So after the first process, then you will understand the second step, and then the next step. So this is successive processing, one after the other. Simultaneous processing is like probably when I ask you to ride a bicycle. So you will process all the information, like say your body weight, how to adjust your body weight, the cycle, the mechanics of the cycle, the weight of the cycle, the movement of the cycle, then your speed, the time that you will take, the distance, all these things is going to be processed together. So this is simultaneous processing. Now in arousal and attention, basically our body is aroused and we are acquiring information as much as possible related to the problem. But this information is processed either successively or simultaneously. So it could be like together. So either you could process the information successively or simultaneously, or both successively and simultaneously. And next is planning. Over here what we do is, once we've got the information, we've processed the information, now we're going to plan the course of action. So what will we do with all this information? How are we going to reach the solution to the problem? Next is the cognitive assessment system. This is basically a battery of tests. A battery of tests means like a collection of tests which was given again by Naglieri, Das and Kirby, and it is based on the PASS model of intelligence. And this test has both verbal and non-verbal tasks, and it can be used for children between the ages 5 to 18 years old. And with this test, we are able to identify children with learning problems or cognitive deficits. So these are 3 questions for you to solve and for you to think about, and we can discuss about it in our online session, which should be soon. Thank you.